Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope so. Thank you so much for joining today. We have our first panel of the day starting off right now. And this panel is going to be really great. It is all about creating a grade A enterprise AI environment. And without any further ado, if we would please have all the panelists go ahead and turn on your camera, unmute yourself. We will be able to begin. Hello, everybody. How's it going? All right, so I will be here the whole time. Andrew, we're just going to begin. If you would take it away with self-introductions for yourself and everyone else, then we can go ahead and get started.
Sure thing, Dan. Thanks everybody for the introduction. Hi, I'm Andrew Robertson. I'm the global head for strategy and business transformation for the digital and data science unit within Sanofi R&D. And I've been there for about big pharma for about 8 years. And the typical stuff that we work on can range from coordinating AI initiatives to resource building to developing both internal and external partnerships, and then of course metrics and evaluation. So my understanding is I'm supposed to go around the horn. So Srilekha, do you want to go next with introductions?
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Srilekha. I work for Amazon, and I'm a technology leader at Amazon, specifically Amazon Prime. My team and I, we work on increasing the subscription value for each and every subscriber of Amazon Prime. And it is an exciting space because we look at solving some of the toughest problems with the most loved subscription service out there. Look forward to chatting more.
Great. Daryush, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Hello, AI4. Thank you for having us. My name is Daryush. I lead product management for JP Morgan's firm-wide AI ML initiative. Our goal is to help JP Morgan Chase as a whole do bigger, better, more impactful, more awesome AI ML throughout the firm.
Fantastic. And David, for the last but not least introduction. David, you might be on mute still. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, my name is David Wang from State Street. I'm managing director, responsible for running artificial intelligence and a financial modeling team in State Street. What do we do? Basically leverage latest AI and machine learning techniques to solve our problems in asset management industry, from front office, mid office to back office. Thank you.
Excellent. So Dan, I understand that we have a number of questions that are going to flash up, and I think I know what they are. So while we're waiting, I can actually just dive into the first one. So the question that I've got is from a high level. What is the current state of affairs for most enterprise AI environments? Are we in early days or are we nearing maturity? And Srilekha, why don't we start with you to see what your response is to this?
Yeah, absolutely. My take on and experience and learning is that we are at the various varying phases of maturity curve depending on the industry, I would say. There are obviously the front runners that are driving the curve and looking ahead into the future problems and the broader problems. And of course, there is the academic world that is looking at the broader perspective of the industry overall. However, more specifically from a curve point of view, there are industries that are adapting and harder to change, whether it is regulatory reasons or some others. I think we are at a varying stages of the maturity curve in various different industries.
Thanks. Daryush, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, actually, it's a little bit hard to answer that question because it's a little bit hard to define maturity when it comes to AI ML. But I definitely agree with Srilekha on this. Depending on the industry that you are in, the level of maturity or the level of by which you have gotten close to the maturity level is going to be different. In our world in JP Morgan, I think we are getting to a point that the regulatory environment and our regulatory obligation compliance obligations are slowly matching the opportunities that we see in AI ML. So although we are moving fairly quickly and fairly fast towards that point, I think the regulations and the environment that we are working on is slowly catching up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you guys pointed out that it's industry specific, and I'll tell you, like, so Sanofi is one of these top 10 large pharma companies, and I got to say, we probably are. I think objectively, we are a little bit behind. The pharma industry is behind. But having said that, we are trying to catch up quickly. I mean, part of the problem is that drug development is just a very drawn out process. So the investments take a lot of time, and I suspect that in your industries, the turnover and the time differential between an intervention and an outcome is maybe much shorter than us. But what we are doing, though, and I think Sanofi's not alone in this, we are really trying to ramp up. There's a lot of areas that we can actually look at, and we're exploring these quite a bit. So you're right there, usually in the context of maturity, we're not mature yet, but I think we're catching up quite quickly. David, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's, like others said, it depends on the industry. And also I think another dimension, it depends on the AI technology itself. What I found in my industry and in my company is something like NLP, OCR, they're a little bit ahead of the other type of AI technology like deep learning to solve financial specific problems. So, in overall, I think in my industry, we're not on near maturity. I don't feel that, but we are a few years into it, right? So I won't say it's a very early stage, but it's we are picking up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, let me ask you really quickly though, because I think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but all of our organizations that we belong to are relatively established and relatively large. In terms of maturity, how do you guys think it compares between large organizations like yours and small ones? And I'll tell you right now, for Sanofi or for the pharma industry, I think it's pretty clear that the smaller organizations are, they're much more nimble and they can actually get ahead and really be on that cutting edge. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Let me start on this one. So Andrew, you're absolutely correct. The smaller the organization, the more nimble they are. But I tend to look at it a little bit differently. At JP Morgan, we have thousands of data scientists and thousands of ML practitioners. And at times it's a little bit hard for us to draw the line between who's an ML practitioner versus analyst versus data scientist. But the level of quantitative approach, the level of analytical approach to our problems is actually fairly mature at JP Morgan. So now that we are thinking about AI ML and moving it even further than where the firm is, the inertia that we see is around the what I call it the legacy practices that the firm had to engage in. Had to mature, had to make it part of the standard operating procedures, and then be able to take another look at those and then say, okay, in the new world, let's say we actually want to run all of these in public cloud. Which one of those standards we can actually relax? Which ones are no longer applicable? Or which new standards and new guardrails we have to build? So the inertia is really about the work that the organization has achieved more than anything else.
Great. David, Srileka, anything to add on that or any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
So yes. So that's one of my observations because we talk to a lot of vendors. Right, smaller vendors tend to be focused on certain niche market, niche technologies that seems to be more cutting edge. But I think it really depends on the large organization. Thinking like our organization, we have existing product and services, right? So we can't just go play AI and ML, see how far it can go. So everything need to make business sense, need to contribute to top line or bottom line, right? So that kind of limit us what we can do in terms of research, trying new things out.
Yeah, and just to add a couple of thoughts on mine, Andrew, thank you. I do believe that the organization's size and their ability to move faster and nimbler, they have advantages on both ends. For example, a larger organization has resources advantage, such as whether it is data availability or resources at their disposal, computing power, and so on and so forth. That is a great advantage, especially considering for AI, data being one of the larger constraints and the challenges that we need to streamline before it can be modeled and used for the purpose of solving a problem. At the same time, as Daryush has pointed out and David has mentioned, the organizational inertia is a big challenge for us to move forward faster and being able to change the models that are established and put it into production. So the happy medium, or bringing the best of the both worlds, is acting as a smaller company with a bigger umbrella of the resources at the disposal, I think would be what we would all strive to do to get there, would be the mechanisms that we put in place.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe this is just isolated to my industry, but we are, I think that for where you guys are, the value has been maybe demonstrated a little bit more than it has in the pharma sector. And we're still kind of building that up. We're working on faith. I think the theories are there. We've seen some really strong isolated case studies of where AI, where deep learning, where neural nets can really be applied. But we're also kind of still working on, there's a working hypothesis that this is going to pay off. And again, part of the issue is, like I said, we've got a very protracted process, like going from early stage discovery all the way to getting something approved. There's an old adage that by the time your drug is born, it'll be graduating college before it can actually be in a clinic. It takes that long. Now, one thing AI can do is really accelerate that quite a bit. But again, we're going on faith that that's the case, and we'll have to see if that pans out. So I think we're going to be moving on to the next question right now, which is this: which infrastructure pieces have you had to get in place to make AI happen in your respective organization? Does this include cloud services, data pipelines? And David, why don't we start with you on this one?
Okay, so yeah, we have, in terms of infrastructure, we have a hybrid cloud. We use Amazon, right, and Microsoft Azure as the public side. We also have built our private infrastructure for AI and machine learning. So these type of machines we have, all equipped with commercial grade GPUs. With certain libraries, we can max out the GPU computing power for some of our AI problems. And in addition to that, from data pipeline perspective, and we initiated some data projects a few years ago to really clean, streamline some of our data in terms of volume, quality, so we can, because pretty much every AI product or project I went through require pretty extensive data and also high quality data, not just only defining your problem, right? Data is very important to us.
So I think data pipeline is definitely part of it for us, being able to move data from point A to point B. Also, as you can imagine, we are crunching a large quantities of structured and unstructured data. So having access to top-notch compute right away is extremely critical for us. So we are heavily investing in utilizing public cloud. But if you want to think about the output of all of these AI ML activities for us, whatever model or ML artifacts that we create, we need to be able to trace it back, all the way back to which data set was used to train it, which data set was used to actually optimize it, which data set was used to test and validate it, who did that, using which code, years ahead of time. So for us, not only data pipeline is critical, but also cataloging the data. Cataloging versions of the data is instrumental. Also making sure that whatever we have trained and built today, that X number of years later in the future, we can actually reproduce it, that we can truly explain why it made a few predictions that it made. So all of those are critical pieces of the end-to-end infrastructure.
Daryush, it's interesting because, in your previous comment, you mentioned regulation. I'll say, like, again, the drug industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries out there right now. And it's so true. I mean, not only knowing where the data comes from, but being able to account for it is critical because a lot of regulatory agencies want to see that. And so we need to have an absolutely crystal clear picture of what it's going to be if we're going to use that analysis for regulatory filing. Now, quite often we don't need to. Sometimes it's just an internal go, no go decision, or we're looking at certain targets, molecular targets to identify and pursue. But if we ever, one thing that we're trying to really ingrain in what we do is if there's a possibility that we're going to use this for a regulatory purpose, we need to make sure where that data is coming from and make sure we can attest to its quality. So, do you have anything to add on this?
Everybody said what I've been thinking about. It's fantastic. All of us are dealing with the same challenges. The only point I would add is the data being unbiased would be my only addition on top of that. Every time we automate something, including AI ML, the problems start to compound if we are not careful enough. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right, good. Great. So just to move on to the next question then. So how have you guys reorganized your respective AI and data science teams? So let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, we are experimenting still. I have seen through the career various ways of organizing the teams, whether it is a centralized team that focuses on the data part of it and another centralized team that works on the models, with one as a supplier and other as a consumer. That works well in some situations, and I've also seen smaller, nimbler spaces which are still innovating, where the problem itself is undefined, especially those areas. The teams being combined, the data team and the ML team, applied scientists and the research scientists acting as one single team, and a cohort that is working on solving and defining the problem itself. When, especially as I said, when we don't have the problem fully defined, or who we are solving for in terms of the target market and so on and so forth. So I've seen it work either way. I think the important part for us to, for our organization has been being able to understand that what kind of data is needed and how do we want to define that supply and consume pipeline. And to earlier point of Dajun and folks, how are we cataloging that data to make sure that we have the clean data every time we reset that clock. And also being able to understand that there's no redundancy in terms of the model creation itself. As you can imagine, in larger organizations, we tend to go at the problems, and there are multiple teams that could be solving the same problem. So at some point, we have to converge, and that being able to understand and establish an organizational structure that allows for that convergence is what we would look for.
Great. Yeah, convergence, I think, is a key theme that we're experiencing as well. But before I go into mine, why don't we try David to see what your thoughts are on how you guys are organizing your AI and data science teams?
Yeah, we are organized in a federated model. We have centralized the AI and ML team, which cover a few different areas, kind of more expertise, centralized, right? So we cover business problems, financial modeling, right? We also cover some of the foundational AI ML services like enhanced OCR or P type of microservices. So we provided these underlying capabilities to other business departments, right? And also we have team that oversee all the governance and across all the company. and working with various business teams and network compliance infrastructure teams. So in addition to that, we actually have teams, smaller teams in not most, but some of the business department divisions, right? They are more specific to their own area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like risk management, trading, right? So they have their own data scientists. Sometimes we overlap, like sometimes our organization, send people along with their people to solve their problems.
Great. Yeah, that actually sounds a little bit similar to the way we've set up as well. At least maybe it's a hybrid between what you described, sort of like and David. So we actually started off, and it's kind of a little bit of a narrative. In the pharma world, digital and data science had this huge buzz to it. Like everybody was so excited about it. This is going to revolutionize everything. But the thing is that again, with large pharma organizations, sometimes the excitement just completely outpaces the organizational need. So what we've actually done is actually sprouted out in several different areas. So for example, in our early stage research, in our immunology groups, in our oncology groups, they might have actually adopted their own specific areas or specific adaptations of AI or utilization of AI strategies. But now we've actually started to evolve a bit. And I think just for the points that you guys have raised, it's so much better if you can actually collaborate and actually draw together a centralized group. So we've evolved into a hub and spoke model where we've centralized the core team of about 65 data scientists, which includes like our translational disease modeling group, which create basically virtual patients to be able to understand what happens between a drug and a patient's biology. A clinical trial simulation team to actually make predictions about if we set up clinical studies in a certain way, what's the outcome going to be like that? It'd be of those, and even like the details, like where to set the sites up, how to recruit patients. And then there's the last one, which is like the hardcore, I call them the hardcore data, like AI group, which does everything from like looking at advanced omics, single cell sequencing, looking at image analysis, like either MRI, medical images, or immunohistochemistry, and really doing the advanced stuff. One thing I'll say about that though is with all of this, the core team does everything in partnership with one of the development teams or the research teams. We've also really been building the partnerships with academic groups as well. And actually, this is another follow-up question I have, Daryush. I want to hear how you guys are organized first, but I'd love to know also if your guys' organizational structure really emphasizes or maybe downplays partnerships with academic researchers. So Daryush, let's hear what you have to say first, and then maybe we can circle right around again with the external component part.
No, certainly. In fact, allow me to answer both questions at the same time. So
Sure.
We do actually have at JP Morgan a group that is dedicated to AI research and applied AI. This group maintains a very close connection with academia. And also tries to push the boundaries of existing approaches and existing algorithms, and also tries to figure out how the new innovations in the AI ML world can actually be applied to the financial services industry. So that's one of the independent groups that we have. The second part is about our lines of businesses. Our lines of businesses, they all have their own analytics and data science ML teams. And most often than not, they are actually structured around different revenue streams for each group. So if you look at Chase, they are structured that way, and investment banking, they are structured that way as well. On the other end of the spectrum, we have our compliance groups, who basically they are another set of eyes on top of the work that we do to make sure that we are staying true to our compliance and regulatory obligations, and that true, let's just call it QA, has been done on any ML artifact that we create. Then it is a centralized function and a centralized group that is actually trying to enable all of these three groups to do their jobs faster, better, and more precise. That centralized group will then build the necessary tools, algorithms, content, like tutorials on things like that, as well as a center of excellence that actually helps pushing the boundaries. So at the end of the day, it is less about a hub and spoke type of a model and more in terms of a connected mesh, connected graph model with some of the edges actually having a slightly higher weight than other ones. So.
I like that term, a connected mesh. Like we use kind of like matrix as well as another one, but it sounds like, you know, drawing that web together, because I guess the expertise could be distributed throughout the company. And honestly, I can see that that's going to be where we end up eventually. I mean, the analogy I kind of use sometimes is like, you know, like word processing, you know, 30 years ago, where you might have a centralized group that can actually really knows Excel or really knows, you know, Word for Windows. But now everybody uses it. And I can actually see that as well. Like a lot of the tools that we're building right now might become commonplace and just like automatically integrated into all of our teams within our organization. So Laqab, what about you? Anything to add on that?
Nothing more, Andrew. Thanks for insight. Thank you.
Well, David, how about you then? Are you guys working with academic partners as well, or how do you actually see that collaboration, those external collaborations?
Yeah, they are important piece to us. State Street actually established some fintech program with MIT a few years ago. We have MIT professor, and also we have a relationship with other top universities in USA and other countries. So yeah, we work with them. We give them specific problems that usually involve more foundational type of research. We give them some problems, data set, and they come back with the result research. So that's one type of collaboration with academics. And in addition to that, we have our team ourselves. We follow up with all the research papers, free, open source projects quite closely, and we just have internal forums to share all the not all some of the interesting pieces. So that's another way we keep up with them.
Great. Good. I think we're gonna go on to the next question then. I think we're still on pace to hit our mark. But when you guys build AI in-house, when do you how do you make the decision to build AI in-house or to buy an existing tool? And maybe you guys can describe the different contexts and decision-making process for that. Laqab, would you like to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. The way I see it is the determination has to start from working back from the customer and working back from the problem that we are trying to solve most of the times. And I say that most of the times because sometimes we are still trying to understand the problem space. But most cases, we have a consumer problem or a customer problem that we are trying to solve when we work back from that. If there is an off-the-shelf tool or a system available, then we would certainly look at that to see how scalable that is. That would make a really good benchmark for us to understand whether or not we can go with it. And also, not every problem needs an ML answer. It could be a simple rule-based system that is pre-existing that we could potentially use, for example, might solve it. So I think it's important for us to understand that differentiation, not to get overexcited and over-index on solving a simpler problem with a harder and a more complex and system. So we don't spend our resources and energy into something more than what is needed. But often we tend to gravitate towards more about building solutions in-house just because of the scale and the flexibility it gives us to eventually grow and build on top of the solutions that we build as well. So controlling our own destiny there.
Great. Daryush, what about you guys?
I agree with Laqab on this. You always need to take a look at the outcome that you want to achieve. First of all, make sure that there is no easy way, rule-based system or others to actually resolve it. But when you actually decide that AI is the right way to go, then it's really all about what you actually want to achieve in there. I'll break the AI kind of problem into multiple pieces. There is the data piece. there is the compute, there is the code and the logic, and then there is operationalization of it, and then maintaining that environment in an operationalized environment. When we look at this spectrum, our goal is to only focus on the parts that they are really specific to financial services or to JP Morgan. And if there is a common component that is actually available out there, honestly, the ROI would shift quite a bit towards the buy. But if there is an area that is really specific to financial services and JP Morgan, or it might actually be a competitive advantage, then our needle kind of shifts over towards build. So we always look at this on a case-by-case basis, and then try to make the right ROI decision.
Great. Yeah, you hit on a couple of the keywords that I was going to bring up in my response. But before I go, David, how about you weigh in on this too?
Yeah, I agree with largely with that. In our organization, we do return on investment, right, and the total cost analysis, and we have a governing bodies whenever involve vendor products to evaluate, right, what is the cost, benefits, and the compliance, operational, the operational perspective as well. So there's many angles we evaluate them, but in general, what I've found in the last few years is whenever it's getting into some of the more kind of public domain AI ML techniques, there are many products out there. They have a much higher economic of scale, so that's almost impossible for internal team to create another way to compete with them. Right? They offer that as a service through cloud, so it's very competitive. But whenever it's, I think it's very specific to industry or specific to the company, but that type of problem, usually we need to build in-house.
Yeah, and I'll just add in there too. I mean, totally agree. And there's a couple of some of the points you guys raised, case by case. Obviously, I think that Sri, like you even started off by saying that we would take a look at off-the-shelf solutions if those exist, right? But just like what Daryush and David, what you guys were talking to, our industry is so specialized that it's really hard to kind of anticipate what the problems are that we're going to be looking at. The way that we kind of organize for us is, our data science team, our centralized hub, kind of almost serves like a prototyping model, where we would actually come up, like we take bespoke problems, we'd actually generate tailor-made solutions, and then really kind of do those as one-offs. And sometimes the one-offs are all we really need. But eventually, we're going to, particularly if we're talking about enterprise AI, we're going to actually start trying to install this in a more routine, more structured way. And so that's when we actually look at scaling. And from there, it's almost more of a handoff to our IT group that's a little bit more skilled on that. On the other hand, the one thing I'll say is that we also do, like I said, we do look at off-the-shelf solutions, but even there's a lot of training and parameter building. We would maybe work with the vendors to kind of train the models or train the solutions that they have to be a little bit more tailored to us. But yeah, like it's just like the industry is just so nuanced. Like something like the example I usually use is looking at NLP or NLG, just like the word approval. In the regulatory context, an approval means so much more than in a natural conversational context. So be able to actually generate that whole library, that whole lexicon, is something that honestly, it doesn't really even exist. And we're even creating our own from scratch right now. That's specific to pharma. Anybody else want to add in before we go on? Daryush, you have a thought?
Yeah, so Andrew, I agree with everything that you mentioned, but I just wanted to highlight one thing. Yes, building something specific for our industry is a pattern. I have seen it quite often, but I've also seen a kind of like a related pattern, which is you have two groups. These two groups have something very similar to one another. Group one has built an algorithm that is 100% optimized for them, and then group two takes a look at it and says, that takes me 95% of the way there. 5% is missing. I'm going to create another one that matches 100% of what I need. Then group C comes and looks at these two and then says 95, 93, I'm going to build something else. And suddenly you have quite a few kind of Lego blocks that they all kind of sort of look the same. I wonder, in your kind of day-to-day world, do you see this problem? And if you do, how do you go about optimizing that situation?
Yeah, so very good point, right? So of course, if we keep going like that, it will be out of control. Huge cost to maintain and support, right? Cause a lot of problems, inconsistency, etc. So we took an approach we call we build some like foundational level microservices, offer the AI ML capabilities to microservices to other teams. That's why we have centralized team, and also we have a centralized review team right across the company. So we research and develop and stamp on these particular foundational service, like a retrieval rank from NLP, right? So there's not those services not exactly as the industry version has, because those versions are trained specifically to public language, not specific to the asset management languages or documents we have. So we are another level above that. So we start to offer the type of service to the other teams, see if they can use it from maybe fund prospectus to legal documents to other settlement agreements to other documentations, right? So the way we solve is through microservices. And whenever there's a specific project problem requires specific solution, we try to reuse these microservices. From there, we build maybe the 20% or 5% is missing.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, and yeah, I agree with both of you guys. And for us, again, is problem specific. So I mentioned we have a disease modeling team that creates these virtual patients. Well, if we've developed one for like a neurodegenerative disease, we can reuse that model for different programs or for different drugs. But actually recreating the model for a different disease, we've got the roadmap to do it, but it would take longer. For things like probability of success calculations and predictions, that can be a little bit more structured. And so, we might enter in different data sets or different variables, but the general approach would be the same. But then and this kind of comes back to one of our earlier questions about maturity. I think the other side of this is a lot of the stuff we're dealing with is still kind of really in its prototype stage. So we wouldn't necessarily expect to see off-the-shelf solutions too frequently. Every once in a while there are some, and we review them, we vet them, we definitely speak and collaborate with a lot of them. But yeah, just as often we would probably either have to work internally or collaborate with a vendor. The one thing I'll add though, and Sri Lanka, you mentioned this like early on, but I think we'd all agree, is that the data itself is critically important. We do work quite a lot in actually licensing and data sets, because these, particularly again in a regulated industry like pharma and healthcare, where you have HIPAA protections, privacy protections, and many others, these data they are quite isolated. The different data sets are the different data sets, and then plus on top of that, it's not just like EHR data. It might be EHR data combined with genomic data combined with other modalities, and the richness and the robustness of the data set is going to vary from vendor to vendor. So that is where we actually would partner quite a bit, and we do pursue those, because we don't always have the data internally. Srileka, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just one thought is, I do see this as a natural curve that organizations and the industries would have to follow. The divergence of problem solutions before they start to converge again. We are seeing those micro trends within each individual organization, but as the industry matures, we're still at the early stages of AI, especially in certain industries, as you mentioned, Andrew, in pharma. I think that will continue to happen. If I were to look into the looking glass here, the trend of divergence will continue to happen for a period of time before we start to see natural fit of base ML models that can supply and feed into more specialized ML models and base infrastructure that would feed and allow for specialized ML models to be built. But I agree with Daryush. Within individual organizations, it's a challenge, and I don't think it's a solved problem or there is a secret recipe that would work for everybody. I think we will diverge some more before we start to converge there.
Great. All right, so moving on, and I think this might be our last question before we do closing points, but what do you all see as the main cultural hurdles when it comes to AI transformation within your respective organizations? David, how about you start off with this one?
So that's a very interesting question. So large organization like my company, right? Those they have been pretty conservative in many things because compliance, regulatory, many reasons, right? Because we service our customers. So while coming to AI, it's cutting edge, innovative. You need to think out of the box, try new things, right? Sometimes fail. So I think the culture hurdle for us is really kind of support from our senior management as well as our business sponsors for various projects and problems. How willing they are to try something like AI ML, which is a lot uncertain than just a typical IT project, which is once you give requirements, you figure out the workflow process, logic, and you code it, it works. They know it'll work before the project starts, right? But AI ML is different. Sometimes it doesn't work in the end, right? So it requires that type of culture change to monetize AI and ML across not a full spectrum, but across many products and services we have. Especially given current market environment, everybody's tight. We need to keep eyes on the revenue and net income, right? So the room to try something more or more aggressive on AI and ML is limited.
So, like, what about you? I mean, Amazon's very much a data-driven company. Do you guys see cultural hurdles here?
Not so much from the teams that I work with. There are certainly pockets of organizations which are much more, I wouldn't say cultural hurdles, but much more slower to adoption for the right reasons. Thinking from a customer point of view and being very thoughtful and less experimental for the right reasons again. But other than that, from a cultural hurdles point of view, I think it is about awareness. And once that awareness is brought in, and once we understand what exactly is the problem that we are trying to solve, I think it is after that, it is being able to experiment and identify the solution. One thing I would add, though, is reinforcing my previous point, which is not every problem needs a ML or an AI solution. So it's being able to understand and narrowing the scope so we don't start to boil the ocean, but actually make incremental improvements. And sometimes that in itself can be a big gain.
Mm. That's a great point. Daryush, how about you then? Why don't we, what do you think it from JP Morgan's perspective?
Actually, I think at JP Morgan we probably have it a little bit easy. We are very used to analytical and numerical approach to every problem. We are very used to running the business by numbers. So from that standpoint, I think there is quite a bit of reception to utilizing AI ML techniques in adding value and bringing value to the customer. I think that the places that we are seeing some differences in approach, cultural differences, if you would, is around what is the right way of doing experimentation in this problem space on these pieces of data, controlling it fairly well. The problem that we were talking about in the previous question around, hey, how much reusability do we build in every approach, or do we go 100% custom? How do we actually share and compare and contrast nodes between different sides of the organization while still maintaining our regulatory obligations to make sure data from one side doesn't leak into the other side? So those are some of the patterns and approaches that we continue to mature with.
It's interesting because like hearing you all speak, yeah, it kind of reemphasizes the fact that maybe pharma is a little bit behind the curve. I mean, we're still kind of grappling with a knowledge gap, to be honest. There's definitely some very, very smart people that are incredibly savvy in this area, that understand it, know how to do it, and can be on the cutting edge. But it's more than that, though. I mean, if it's, one of my roles is business transformation, which is we have these tools, we have to make sure we leverage them appropriately. And the challenge we have is, there's a little bit of a distrust here. I mean, the pharma process, it's been not ironed out. There's always innovation there, but the way that we do this is planned years in advance. And just someone come in and say, well, we've got a new approach, a new tool that we can actually use. It's got there's going to be some resistance to applying it unless you come in at the exact right part, like right before a clinical trial is initiated or is in the planning stage, right when we're in the discovery of the molecule, right when we're going to go to first in human. We need to get in those right windows. Having said that, though, we are trying to build this up, and we're actually making a lot of strides here. Again, I spoke about the partnerships with academic labs. We just penned a partnership with the MIT J Clinic, which for us is actually a decent deal. I don't think many pharma companies are doing this. But one of the components on top of these targeted research collaboration agreements is really to look at education components. Like, can we actually start working with them to set up boot camps, with them to set up courses for staff level, but also for executive leadership, so they can actually see this and appreciate that, look, there's a lot of potential here. And the ROI, the return on investment, might not be immediate, but it's something that really shouldn't be ignored. And the last part of this is like, sometimes you don't have a very concrete ROI when you make a decision. Sometimes we go off of like fear or faith. Like, if we faith that if we do this, it will work out. Fear that if we don't do this, all of our competitors will, and then we'll just be behind the ball down the line. Any last comments on this point? Otherwise, I think we're kind of getting near to the end of the hour. If not, then what I'd like to do then maybe for the last couple of minutes is maybe just go around to each of you for maybe a 2-minute close, just to say, if you have any last thoughts about the discussion, about adoption of enterprise AI in your respective organizations, or now that we've seen a couple of different large companies compared to each other on this call, if you have any additional thoughts there.
Hello, everyone. If I could just chime in, we actually have about 1.5 minutes.
Oh gosh, all right, I'll stop right there.
Would love to hear them if they're about 15 seconds each.
All right, then I'll give 15 seconds instead of 2 minutes. All right, Dan, thanks a lot. All right, Daryush, last 15 seconds, what do you have?
Don't be afraid of the transformation. Give it a shot. There are some customizations you need to build, but it's going to be worth it. Just focus on the numbers, focus on the accuracy, and focus on the value for your users. Start with the customer, everything else will follow.
Great. David?
Yeah, I think AI, ML still have a lot of room to play in my industry, asset management and financial service in general. So just focus on your problem and take care of your customer to be an essential partner for them, and looking for opportunities to explore AI, ML to make your customer experience better, and bring more values to our partners. Thank you.
Great. Srileka?
Yeah, walk back from your customer. You're in it for a long haul. So prepare for that long haul. Build your pipelines, build your skill set, build your resources. It is a long haul, and it is going to be worth it.
Great. And then for me, I'll just say that for pharma, it's just a very exciting time. There's a lot of investment to be made internally. Data is always going to be the bottleneck. But, we've been partnering internally. We've been trying to coordinate and really build up this collaborative hub. And I think we made a lot of strides. It's going to be an exciting 5 to 10 years ahead of us and how we see these tools really pan out.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. Thank you to the panelists. A big virtual round of applause for them. I hope you all enjoyed it. Go ahead and make your way to your next session or do some networking or go check out a virtual booth. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you.